Chesty Puller, the most decorated Marine in US history, exemplifies leadership, courage, and resilience. From the jungles of Central America to the frozen mountains of Korea, Puller's story is one of fierce determination and an unwavering commitment to his men. His 5 Navy crosses and iconic quotes, like "We're surrounded," that simplifies the problem, demonstrate the grit and bravery that made him a legend in the Marine Corps. His legacy, from World War II to the Korean War, is still revered by Marines today. Louis Burwell Chesty Puller, born on June 26, 1898, in West Point, Virginia, grew up in a family deeply rooted in military tradition. His early life was marked by a fascination with the stories of Confederate soldiers, which fueled his desire to serve. This deep connection to military history would guide him toward one of the most decorated careers in the history of the US Marine Corps. In 1917, inspired by the stories of World War I, Puller enlisted in the Marine Corps. Despite missing combat in the Great War, he spent the next few years sharpening his leadership skills. His dedication to the Marine Corps' values of honor, courage, and commitment became the cornerstone of his military journey. His first taste of action came in the early 1920s during the Banana Wars in Central America, where his fearlessness and tactical brilliance first began to surface. Puller's early career saw him leading troops in some of the most rugged terrains in Haiti and Nicaragua. His experience in guerrilla warfare during this period made him a fierce and innovative leader. His combat tactics were both brutal and efficient, and he quickly gained a reputation among his men as someone who led from the front and never backed down. His leadership in these early conflicts earned him his first Navy Cross, one of many to come. He quickly became known for his fearlessness and his ability to inspire his troops under the most challenging conditions. His presence on the battlefield commanded respect, and it was clear that Puller was a Marine who thrived in the heat of combat. By the time the United States entered World War II, Puller had already earned a reputation as one of the Marine Corps' toughest and most respected officers. His leadership in the Pacific Theater, especially during the Guadalcanal campaign, was legendary. The harsh jungle terrain, combined with relentless enemy attacks, tested even the most seasoned soldiers, but Puller rose to the occasion. During the Battle of Guadalcanal in 1942, Puller's unit was vastly outnumbered, yet he led his Marines through fierce fighting, holding off multiple enemy assaults. His relentless defense of Henderson Field became a critical moment in the Pacific War. For his bravery and leadership, Puller earned his 3rd Navy Cross, solidifying his status as one of the Marine Corps' finest leaders. What made Puller unique was his unwavering belief in his men and his ability to rally them in the face of overwhelming odds. He was known for his quick wit and his no-nonsense approach to leadership. His famous quote, "We're surrounded," that simplifies our problem, during the Korean War, would later become a symbol of his indomitable spirit. Puller's determination was not just about defeating the enemy, but also about keeping his men alive. His focus on preparing his Marines for the harsh realities of war became a hallmark of his command style. Whether in training or in battle, his leadership was characterized by a relentless drive to be the best. During the Battle of Peleliu in 1944, Puller faced one of his toughest challenges. The island's rugged terrain and heavily fortified Japanese positions made it a brutal campaign. Despite the heavy losses, Puller led his men with unflinching resolve, earning yet another Navy Cross for his bravery. The war took a toll on Puller, physically and emotionally. Yet, he never wavered in his dedication to his country and his men. The post-war years saw Puller transitioning into a peacetime leader, but his combat legacy remained his most enduring achievement. So far, we explored Puller's rise from a young Marine during the Banana Wars to a fierce leader in World War II's Pacific Theater. His heroism in battles like Guadalcanal and Peleliu solidified his place as one of the toughest Marines. Now we delve deeper into his pivotal role in the Korean War. The Incheon landings and the legendary Battle of Chosin Reservoir not only defined Puller's career, but also became a benchmark of Marine Corps' leadership and bravery. In 1950, when the Korean War erupted, Puller was called back into action. Now a seasoned veteran, he was tasked with leading the 1st Marine Regiment during the Battle of Incheon. The amphibious landing at Incheon was one of the most daring military maneuvers of the war, and Puller's leadership was instrumental in its success. His strategic brilliance and ability to inspire his troops played a critical role in turning the tide of the war. Puller's leadership of the Incheon landings demonstrated his ability to think on his feet and execute complex military operations under intense pressure. His experience from World War II gave him the confidence to make bold decisions, and his men trusted him implicitly. The success of Incheon earned Puller yet another Navy Cross, adding to his growing list of military accolades. As the Korean War dragged on, Puller found himself leading his Marines through one of the most brutal winters in military history. The Battle of Chosin Reservoir in 1950 became another defining moment for Puller. Surrounded by Chinese forces in sub-zero temperatures, Puller and his men fought their way out of the trap, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. Despite the overwhelming odds, Puller's leadership during the Chosin Reservoir campaign became the stuff of legend. His calm demeanor in the face of adversity and his ability to keep his men focused on the mission at hand were critical to their survival. His famous quote, "We're surrounded. Good. Now we can kill them in every direction," perfectly captured his warrior spirit. Puller's success in Korea was not without its costs. The brutal fighting and harsh conditions took a toll on his health, and in 1951, he was forced to retire due to medical reasons. However, his impact on the Marine Corps and his status as a legendary leader were already cemented. Chesty Puller retired as a lieutenant general, one of the most decorated Marines in US history. Over the course of his career, he earned 5 Navy Crosses, the second highest military decoration for valor, making him one of the most celebrated military figures in American history. His leadership in 3 major conflicts, World War II, the Korean War, and the Banana Wars, defined him as the embodiment of Marine Corps values. In retirement, Puller remained an outspoken advocate for the military, often speaking to young Marines and sharing his experiences. He became a symbol of toughness, resilience, and leadership, and his legacy continues to inspire generations of Marines to this day. Despite his numerous accolades, Puller was always humble about his achievements. He believed that his success was a reflection of the men he led, and he often credited his Marines for his accomplishments. This humility, combined with his fierce determination, made him a beloved figure within the Marine Corps. Chesty Puller passed away on October 11, 1971, but his legend only grew after his death. His name is still spoken with reverence among Marines, and his leadership style is studied in military academies around the world. His ability to lead by example, his unshakable courage, and his commitment to his men set the standard for what it means to be a Marine. Puller's legacy lives on in Marine Corps culture. Every Marine learns about Chesty Puller in boot camp, and his name is often invoked as a source of inspiration. His story is a reminder that leadership is not just about giving orders, but about earning the trust and respect of those you lead. Today, Chesty Puller is remembered as one of the most iconic figures in Marine Corps history. His life and career serve as a testament to the power of leadership, courage, and perseverance. For Marines everywhere, Chesty Puller will always be a symbol of what it means to serve with honor and distinction.
All right, everybody, buckle up, because today we are diving deep into the legend of Chesty Puller.
Ooh.
Chesty Puller, you know him, right? The medals, the quotes, this larger-than-life Marine, but we're going for the why today.
Mm-hmm.
What made Chesty Puller more than just a name in a history book?
You know, it's interesting you say that because Puller's story isn't in some grand strategy. It's in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
He embodied the Marine Corps code, honor, courage, commitment.
Right.
Not as words on a page, but as like the very fiber of his being.
Yeah, and it's not like he came from, a long line of pacifists or anything. I mean, growing up surrounded by stories of Confederate soldiers that had to have some type of impact, right?
It's true. That upbringing steeped in military tradition, it planted a seed. But it's what he did with it that's important. Even missing combat in World War I, he used those early years to master the basics, to become a student of his craft.
And then come the 1920s, and we have the Banana Wars, and I have to admit, this is where my knowledge gets a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
It's not exactly front page history for most of us. What was Puller walking into?
Picture this. The jungles of Haiti and Nicaragua. You're not facing lines in a field, but shadows in the leaves.
Wow.
It was in those crucibles, those guerrilla wars, that Puller began to forge his leadership style.
Huh.
Every patrol was a lesson in adaptation, in making the impossible possible.
I can see how that kind of experience would stick with you, but we're talking about more than just surviving here, right? He was developing a reputation even back then.
Puller led from the front, always. And it wasn't about barking orders, it was about action, about decisiveness.
Right.
The men under his command saw that he wouldn't ask them to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. And that breeds a different kind of loyalty.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see the building blocks of the legend here, the unwavering commitment, the almost instinctual understanding of tactics. It's like those early battles were molding him into something different.
Yeah.
They were preparing him for something else. And then the world explodes, right? I mean, World War II. It's the big one.
Yeah.
What happens when you take a leader forged in those kinds of fires and you put him on the biggest stage imaginable?
Well, for Puller, it wasn't about like a change in personality. It was about the scale, right?
Yeah.
The Pacific Theater became his new jungle.
Right.
And few places were as intense as Guadalcanal.
You read the accounts and it's almost impossible to grasp. The heat, the disease, the relentless fighting. It's the stuff of nightmares.
Right.
And Puller not only endured it, but led through it.
Guadalcanal was a proving ground for every lesson Puller had learned.
Right.
The Japanese were a different enemy, disciplined, fanatical.
Yeah.
But he adapted, countered their tactics, and most importantly, he never let the pressure break him.
It's like, and that brings us to, I think, one of the most telling moments in Puller's story, the Battle of Guadalcanal in 42. His battalion surrounded, outnumbered, and in the thick of it all, what does he say? We're surrounded, that simplifies our problem. I mean, how can anyone stay that calm, that clear-headed in that situation?
You know, it's a quote that's often misunderstood.
Yeah.
People focus on the toughness, but it's about tactical awareness.
Right.
Puller knew his men. He knew the terrain. Being surrounded meant knowing where the enemy was coming from. It wasn't bravado, it was strategy.
It's like he's playing chess while everybody else is in a fist fight.
Yeah.
And this wasn't like a one-time thing. This is a pattern throughout his career.
Exactly. And it's what allowed him to not just survive those battles, but win them.
Yeah.
But even for a leader like Puller, war takes its toll.
Of course.
2 years later, we see this at Peleliu.
Yeah, Peleliu. Another one of those names that just sends shivers down your spine.
Yeah.
What was it about that battle that pushed Puller, and really everybody, but what was it about that battle that pushed Puller to his limits?
Peleliu was brutal, even by Pacific Theater standards.
Yeah.
The Japanese had dug in, the fighting was hand-to-hand, and the casualties, they were staggering.
Yeah.
Puller never shied away from the front lines.
Right.
He shared the hardship, the fear, the grief of his men. It's why they'd follow him anywhere.
Right.
But it came at a price.
And yet, even with everything, everything he'd seen, everything he'd been through, 1950 rolls around, the Korean War kicks off.
Yeah.
And who did they call? It's like the world couldn't imagine a fight without Chesty Puller in it.
It wasn't about glory for him, though, was it?
Right.
Puller could have easily stayed home.
Oh, yeah.
Rested on his laurels.
For sure.
But that wasn't his way. Duty called. His Marines meted him. That says more about the man than any medal ever could.
Absolutely. And Korea was a whole different kind of brutal. The freezing cold, the relentless enemy, the fighting that just seemed to go on and on.
Yeah.
What was that like for a leader like Puller, going from the jungles of the Pacific to those frozen mountains?
Korea tested everyone and everything.
Yeah.
Puller was older, carrying the scars of past battles, both visible and invisible.
Right.
And yet that core of steel, that unwavering resolve, it never wavered.
Yeah.
He was a steady hand in a storm, exactly what his Marines needed.
We've got to talk about Incheon.
Okay.
That landing,
Yeah.
It was daring. Some might even say reckless.
Right.
But he pulls it off.
He did.
What does that tell you about how his experience, his instincts had evolved at that point?
Incheon was quintessential. Puller,
Yeah.
high risk, high reward. He'd mastered the art of calculated risk, of seeing the possibilities others missed.
Right.
And his men trusted him implicitly.
Yeah.
They'd seen him make those calls before, knew he wouldn't gamble with their lives needlessly.
And then Chosen Reservoir.
Yeah.
Even the name, it sends a chill down your spine.
Because
Surrounded, cut off, freezing cold, the Chinese army closing in.
brutal.
It's hard to imagine a more desperate situation.
Chosen was where legends were forged and broken.
Right.
And in the heart of that frozen hell, what does Puller do? He rallies his men, and I quote, "We're surrounded. Good. Now we can kill them in every direction." That line is more than just a quote. It's a window into his soul.
It really is. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. That refusal to quit, that absolute belief in himself and his Marines. It's no wonder he's still studied today.
Absolutely.
But Chosen took its toll, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Puller was never the same, physically.
Right.
He was forced to retire in 51.
Yeah.
A hero's body worn down by a hero's war.
It's a reminder that even legends are human.
Yeah.
But what's amazing is that Chesty Puller didn't fade away. You know what I mean? He continued to fight for his Marines, for their recognition, for their well-being, right up until his death in 71.
And that's where his true legacy takes shape, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just the 5 Navy Crosses, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star.
Right.
It's about the values he embodied. Toughness, resilience, leadership.
Right.
It's about inspiring generations of Marines to strive for something greater than themselves.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's your takeaway from all of this? What will you remember about Chesty Puller? What can we all learn from a life lived with such courage and conviction?
Perhaps it's this. When faced with overwhelming odds, whether on a battlefield or in our own lives, remember Chesty Puller.
Yeah.
Remember that true leadership comes from within, from a deep well of courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to something bigger than ourselves. That's a legacy worth fighting for.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A huge thank you to our expert for joining us today, and thank you at home for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible life of Chesty Puller.
Chesty Puller's name has become synonymous with Marine Corps' excellence. With 5 Navy Crosses and service in 3 major wars, Puller's fierce leadership and commitment to his men made him a military legend. His influence extends beyond the battlefield. Puller's legacy is deeply ingrained in Marine Corps culture, where his story continues to inspire new generations of warriors. A true symbol of honor, courage, and resilience, Chesty Puller's place in history is secure, and his legacy will never fade.